Morning my daughter called to say she'd made me a doctor's appointment. I remember thinking how strange it was that she'd never done that before in 68 years of my life. I'm not a man who goes to the doctor much. My wife Claire used to drag me every year for the annual checkup, but Claire passed 4 years ago, and since then I've mostly kept to myself out here on the property in Denton County. 62 acres. A barn I don't use anymore. A pond my grandson used to fish in before my daughter moved the family to Austin, and visits became something that happened at Christmas if I was lucky. My daughter's name is Brenda. She's 41 years old. She has her mother's eyes and, I've come to learn, none of her mother's heart. She called on a Tuesday. I was out by the fence line checking on the section that had come loose after the last storm, and when I saw her name on the phone screen, I felt that small, warm thing a father feels when his child reaches out. Even now, after everything, I still felt it. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. "Daddy," she said, and her voice was bright in that particular way it gets when she wants something. "I've been worried about you. I made you an appointment at the cardiologist down here in Austin. Just a checkup. Nothing scary. I thought maybe you could come stay with us for a few days. Let me take care of you for once." I stood there with one hand on the fence post and looked out at the flat brown land and thought about how quiet the house had gotten since Claire died. 4 years of quiet, 4 years of heating up canned soup and watching the evening news and going to bed at 9 because there was nothing else to do. "I feel fine," I told her. "I know you do, but you're 68, Daddy, and your blood pressure was high last time you mentioned it. Just come down. We'll get you checked out. I'll make your favorite pot roast. The kids want to see you." The kids. My grandchildren. Emma was 13 now and Cody was 10, and I hadn't seen either of them since the previous December. "All right," I said. I drove down on a Thursday 5 hours south on 35, and Brenda and her husband Gregory met me in the driveway of their house in a suburb called Cedar Park. It's one of those neighborhoods where every house looks like every other house. Tan stone and black shutters and a 2-car garage and a little patch of St. Augustine grass in front. Gregory sells insurance. He's the kind of man who calls you sir, but looks at you like you're an inconvenience. He shook my hand and carried one of my bags and told me it was great to see me in a tone that suggested it was not. Dinner that night was fine. The pot roast was good. Emma showed me a drawing she'd done of a horse, and Cody talked about his baseball team. Brenda kept filling my glass with sweet tea and touching my arm and laughing at things I said that weren't particularly funny. Gregory was quiet in the way he gets, scrolling his phone under the table when he thought nobody noticed. I went to bed that night in the guest room with its beige walls and its artificial lavender smell, and told myself I was being too hard on them. They were busy people. They had their lives. I was an old man who'd driven 5 hours and was tired and reading too much into things. The appointment was the next morning at 9. Brenda drove. Gregory came along, which I thought was unusual. The man had never taken a day off work for anything family-related that I could remember. But I told myself maybe he was being supportive. They were both dressed nicely. Brenda had on a blazer I'd never seen before. The office was on the 4th floor of a medical building near the Domain. It didn't look like any cardiologist's office I'd ever seen. There was no waiting room full of old men with their blood pressure cuffs. There was a reception desk and a short hallway, and then a conference room with a long table. A man in a suit was already seated at the table. He stood up when we came in and introduced himself. Not a doctor, an attorney. His name was on a placard in front of him. There were papers on the table. I looked at Brenda. She was smiling. That particular smile I hadn't seen in years, the one that doesn't reach her eyes. "What is this?" I asked. "It's just some estate planning, Daddy. We talked about this. You need to have your affairs in order. Raymond here is going to walk you through everything." We had not talked about this. I am certain of that. I would remember. The attorney, Raymond, began explaining. What he was describing was a general, durable power of attorney that would give Brenda full control over my finances, my property, my medical decisions. Additionally, there was a quitclaim deed for the land in Denton County, 62 acres with my name on it that Claire and I had bought the year we got married and paid off over 30 years. "Just sign here," Raymond said, pushing the first page toward me. "And here, and here." I looked at the papers. I looked at my daughter. Gregory was standing near the window with his arms crossed. Something in his posture reminded me of a man waiting for a bus. Patient. Certain the bus was coming. I picked up the pen. And then the door opened. A woman I hadn't noticed. She must have stepped in from a side office, crossed the room quickly, and stopped beside me. She was maybe 50, wearing scrubs under a white coat, a lanyard with a hospital ID around her neck. She put her hand on my arm, very lightly, the way you touch someone when you don't want to startle them. "Mr. Adler," she said, low and even. "My name is Patricia Holloway. I'm the patient advocate assigned to this building. Before you sign anything, I need you to step outside with me for just a moment." Brenda's smile went flat. "He doesn't need a patient advocate," she said. "This is just family paperwork. Mom, it's standard procedure when a patient over 65 is present for document signing. It'll just take a moment." I don't know why I stood up. Maybe because her voice was calm in a room where everything else suddenly felt loud. Maybe because the way Gregory shifted his weight toward the door when I reached for the pen had tripped some old wire in me. The kind of wire a man develops after 40 years of reading cattle and weather and people. I stood up and followed her out. She took me down the hallway and around a corner, out of earshot. She kept her voice low. "I have to be careful what I tell you," she said. "But I've worked in this building for 11 years. That attorney is not a cardiologist's referral. That attorney is a real estate and estate attorney. His firm handles asset transfers. The document you are about to sign is not standard estate planning. It transfers your property and your financial authority entirely, with no mechanism for reversal." I heard the words. They took a moment to arrange themselves into meaning. "My daughter set this up," I said. It wasn't a question. She looked at me steadily. "I can't speak to anyone's intentions. What I can tell you is that you have the absolute right to decline to sign anything today. You have the right to have your own attorney review any document before signing. And if anyone pressures you after you've expressed that you want independent legal advice, that itself is a problem." I stood in that hallway for a moment. There was a motivational poster on the wall. A sunrise. Some words about new beginnings. "The deed to my land," I said. "Claire and I stopped. I couldn't finish the sentence. "Take your time," she said. I took a breath. "How long have you known something was off about this appointment?" They called ahead to confirm a quote-unquote wellness check. "There's no cardiologist in this building, Mr. Adler. There never was." I walked back into the conference room. Brenda looked up at that smile already reassembling itself, and Gregory pushed off from the window, and Raymond uncapped his pen. "I appreciate your time," I said. "I'm not signing anything today." The smile collapsed. "Daddy, I want my own lawyer to look at this. That's my right. You don't need a lawyer. This is just family, Brenda." My voice came out quieter than I expected. "There's no cardiologist in this building." The room went very still. Gregory said, "We can explain. I'd like my keys," I said. I drove my own truck. I got on 35 heading north, and I didn't stop for 2 hours. I pulled off at a gas station outside of Georgetown and sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the air conditioner blowing, and I cried. Not the kind of crying that's about sadness, exactly. The kind that happens when something you suspected but refused to believe finally confirms itself in a room with fluorescent lighting and a man in a suit. I thought about Claire, about the year we bought that land, how we drove out to it on a Sunday afternoon after church and walked around in the dry grass and talked about what we'd build. A home. A life. Something that would be there after we were gone. I thought about the times I'd written Brenda a check when things got tight. The refinancing on the Austin house I'd helped with 3 years ago. $22,000 I hadn't thought twice about because she was my daughter. I thought about Emma showing me her horse drawing, about Cody talking about baseball. I pulled out my phone and called my brother-in-law, a man named Ted, who'd been married to Claire's sister for 30 years and who I trusted more than almost anyone alive. Ted had spent 20 years as a county clerk before he retired, and he knew more about property law in Texas than most lawyers. "Harlan," he said when he picked up. "You all right?" "No," I said. "I need to tell you something." Ted listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Don't go back to that house. Drive home tonight. My things are there. Your truck is there. Your phone is there. Everything else is replaceable. Drive home, Harlan. Call me when you get there." I drove home. 5 hours north on 35 with the radio off and the flat Texas dark coming in around me, and the road stretched out ahead in the headlights. I thought about every year of my life that had led to that afternoon. Every choice. Everything I'd given freely, without wondering what it cost me. When I pulled into my own driveway at 11:30 at night and saw the porch light on, I always leave the porch light on, I felt something release in my chest. The land was still mine. I was still standing on it. I called Ted back, and we talked for an hour. The next morning, he came over with his neighbor, a retired attorney named Bill Cortez, who knew Texas property and estate law cold. Bill looked at the photograph I'd taken of the documents with my phone before I left. I'd thought to do that at least. Whatever instinct made me do it, I'm grateful for it, and he spent 20 minutes reading in silence. Then he looked up and said, "This quitclaim deed, if signed, would have been immediately recordable. There's no trust mechanism, no life estate provision, nothing protecting your right to occupy or benefit from the property. You'd have signed over full title. And the power of attorney? Durable, broad, effective immediately. She could have emptied your accounts by Monday." I sat with that for a moment. Monday. I'd have driven home not knowing. I'd have gone to sleep in my house that was no longer my house. I asked Bill what my options were. He walked me through them carefully. He said the first thing I needed to do was call my bank and flag the accounts, let them know there was a potential fraud concern, and to require additional verification on any transactions. He said I should reach out to my county deed office and confirm the status of my property record. He said I should consult with a family law attorney about the potential legal exposure here, because what Brenda and Gregory had attempted, a coordinated, deceptive scheme to obtain a vulnerable adult's signature on documents surrendering assets, had a name in Texas law, and it wasn't a small name. Elder financial exploitation. It's a felony. I didn't sleep much that week. I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling and listen to the house settle, and try to square the daughter I'd raised with the woman in that conference room who'd stood there with her smile falling off her face when I said I wasn't signing, trying to find the moment when those two people had become the same person. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was always there, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. That's the thing about loving someone, the way a parent loves a child. It does something to your vision. You see what you want to see. You explain away the things that don't fit. You tell yourself that the cold calculation in their eyes is just stress, just adult life, just the economy being hard on everyone. My attorney sent a formal letter. There was no criminal complaint filed. I decided against that, partly for the grandchildren's sake and partly because I am 68 years old and I don't have the energy to want anyone to go to prison. What I wanted was for it to be over, for the land to be safe, for my name to stay on what Claire and I built. Brenda called once after the letter arrived. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry. She said Gregory had pressured her into it. She said she'd been scared about their finances and hadn't been thinking clearly. She said she hoped I'd understand someday. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. I tried to hear my daughter in it. I think she was in there somewhere, but I don't know if sorry is enough for what was in that conference room, in those documents, in the careful lie of a cardiology appointment that never existed. I haven't called her back. It's been about 4 months now. Ted comes over on Fridays and we sit on the porch and drink coffee, and sometimes we don't talk about any of it, and that's fine. Bill Cortez helped me set up a legitimate estate plan, a revocable living trust, a real one, drafted by someone who works for me and not for whoever's going to inherit. And it's sitting in a file drawer with my other important papers, and I know exactly what's in it. Emma texted me last month, just a picture of a new drawing she'd done. A dog this time. I texted back that it was real good and that I was proud of her. I don't know what she's been told about what happened. I hope not much. She's 13 years old, and she draws dogs and horses, and she doesn't need to carry the weight of the things adults do to each other. I keep the porch light on. I check the fence line after storms. I put flowers on Claire's grave on the first Sunday of every month, and I tell her about whatever's been going on, the weather, the land, the small ordinary things that make up a life. I told her about the appointment, about the woman in the white coat who put her hand on my arm, about driving home in the dark. I think Claire would have said, "You always knew when something was wrong. You just had to trust yourself enough to act on it." She would have been right. She usually was. The land is still mine. 62 acres. The same land we walked on a Sunday afternoon a long time ago, when everything we had was ahead of us, and the dry grass came up to our knees, and Claire laughed at something I said, and the sound of it carried out across the flat Texas, nothing for what felt like forever. I still hear it sometimes, on quiet mornings when the light comes in low and the whole place is still. That's enough. That's more than enough. There's a version of that Thursday where I pick up the pen. I've thought about it more than I'd like to admit. How close it was, how natural it would have felt. My daughter beside me, a man in a suit across the table, papers that looked official the way all papers look official when you're 68 and you trust the person who handed them to you. I would have signed my name the same way I've signed it 10,000 times, and by Monday it would have been over, the land gone. The accounts open to someone else's hands. Everything Claire and I spent 30 years building, transferred in the time it takes to uncap a pen. What stopped me wasn't cleverness. I want to be honest about that. I didn't walk into that room with suspicion. I walked in as a father who missed his grandchildren and was grateful someone was paying attention to his health. What stopped me was one woman who chose to do the right thing when she didn't have to, and some old stubborn part of me that listened. I've been thinking about what it means to actually see clearly, not just to look, but to see. I spent years making excuses for small things that didn't add up. The coldness in Gregory's eyes at dinner, the way Brenda's warmth always seemed to arrive alongside a request. I saw those things and I filed them away under "family is complicated" and moved on. That's not wisdom. That's just comfort. Real clarity is harder. It means sitting with what you actually observe instead of what you want to be true, even when the truth is about someone you love. And there's something about character that I keep coming back to. Not the kind you talk about, but the kind that shows up in small moments when no one's watching. Patricia Holloway didn't have to step into that room. Whatever her official role was, she could have stayed at her desk and let a tired old man sign his life away. She didn't. That says everything about who she is and what Brenda and Gregory did. The careful planning of it, the fake appointment, the attorney already seated and waiting. That says everything too. Character isn't declared. It accumulates quietly in the choices people make when they think the cost is low enough. The hardest part wasn't the legal side of it. Bill Cortez handled that. The hardest part was deciding to stand up and walk out of that room when every polite instinct I had said to sit back down and not make a scene. That took something I'm not sure I had much of before Claire died, the willingness to protect myself even when it meant conflict with someone I loved. I'm not naturally a man who makes a fuss. But I've learned, later than I should have, that not making a fuss can be its own kind of surrender. The land is still mine. The porch light still comes on every night. Ted still comes on Fridays. Emma still sends drawings. Some things, once you almost lose them, you hold differently. Not tighter, just more honestly, with both eyes open this time.